Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Boogie Board Tiki Bar. Today, I am joined by Scott Mooers, who's had an incredible career across public, huge companies, across startups, across private equity backed companies in basically every facet of revenue operations, of finance. And so, Scott, I'm really pumped to talk to you today. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
Now, nobody wants to be a RevOps leader when they grow up, when they're a little kid, and it's not because they don't like RevOps. Obviously, no one knows that it exists, but I see a baseball visual behind you. Was that what you were looking at becoming when you were a kid?
That's what I hope to be. Carrying that little league dream. Fortunately for me, I was able to carry it through college. I thought it was an opportunity that I wanted to pursue, but it is extremely, extremely tough to even get close to Major League Baseball, which unfortunately it didn't pan out for me. But there's a lot of lessons learned along the way.
I have no doubt. And I saw a post on LinkedIn that you were referencing the Cubs. You're in California now. Did you grow up in Chicago?
My father grew up in Chicago, and all of my father's side of the family. So I spent my summer times traveling back to see my aunts, uncles, grandparents, and they would take myself and my older brother out to Wrigley Field, and it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, Wrigley Field is hard to beat the way that it's just planted in the city there. And you're a loyal person then, because for the majority of your love of the Cubs, then they were not what you want out of a team. But you got there in what 2015, 2016.
2016, and to your point, it was rough going there for about 30 years, but very loyal indeed.
So, but you played college baseball. That must have been, pretty intense experience. Any type of college athletics is like it's the real deal from a time management standpoint. Was that like your kind of welcome to the working world moment?
It was dual employment. It was just grinding it out academically, and then you spend so much time on the field or traveling or even eating with your teammates that it's just part of life. But it was an amazing experience. Like I said, great learning opportunities. And the beautiful thing about baseball is that it's a humbling sport. It's a game of failure. So it teaches you how to deal with adversity, which has been a lifelong lesson.
Absolutely. Yeah. The best player in existence. What 400 has been hit one time by Ted Williams. Is that
Ted,
correct? So
you
yeah,
hit the
that'll
nail on the
that'll
head.
that'll definitely teach you about how to keep on trucking, so to speak. But so you play college baseball, and then it looks like via LinkedIn, your first gig was at Oracle. How did you end up at Oracle?
It was actually PeopleSoft
It was
during
PeopleSoft.
the hostile takeover by Oracle. And everything I had learned in business law class at the University of San Francisco told me there's no way this thing's getting past the antitrust lawsuit. I was wrong, and Oracle did finish the takeover.
So that's happening while you're coming on and just onboarding, getting used to like professional life.
That's correct.
What is that? How does that manifest in your day to day?
You know, I just wanted to work for a company with a great culture, and I was fortunate enough that PeopleSoft had that. And while I'm working there and experiencing this great culture, I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is a place that I would love to build a career. Unfortunately for me, Larry Ellison and Oracle had different ideas for the future of PeopleSoft, but I mean, they still have that business unit as part of the broader Oracle mothership.
Yeah. And what were you actually doing with that first gig?
Yeah, so I started off in their FP&A department or their finance team, and I was a contracts administrator and billing specialist. So we would work until like 2 a.m. on New Year's Eve, processing all the incoming master services agreements, making sure that we had the revenue recognition plans set up appropriately. And then as a billing specialist, you want to make sure that you're actually invoicing your customers accurately for what it is that they were buying. It got pretty intense, but it was a great experience nonetheless.
I'm sure you never had to tell the sales team that something that they sold was wrong or bunk or impossible. But you're young, you're like probably 23 years old or something at that point. Is that a difficult conversation to have?
Incredibly difficult conversation. You have somebody who's a tried and true multi-million dollar per deal sales rep, and they're pursuing some of the biggest logos in the business. And you're closing in on midnight, and it's end of quarter, end of year. And you do not want to be the human being that is standing in the way of booking that deal. But, as a public entity, you've got to book it properly.
Absolutely, absolutely. So was that one of the big learnings from that gig is how to interface with people like that, develop relationships so you can get in front of stuff like that?
Absolutely. And for the most part, 9.9% of all those human beings are just good people. And we all want to do it the right way and win the right way. And this is once again a lesson learned. But yeah, there's things that you learn going through that process. What does an MSA stand for? What is GSA pricing? What is revenue recognition? How do we set these things up properly in an ERP? What do all these acronyms mean? So great learning opportunities all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get it at such both a kind of a broad data level, but also on that anecdotal basis of seeing how things are actually manifesting on the deal by deal basis. I don't think there's much substitute for that. And you moved to EMC after this. And what intrigues you about the opportunity at that point in your life to try out at EMC?
Yeah, so I had a referral into EMC's FP&A department, and I couldn't even told you really what financial planning and analysis was at that point in time. But it was a great opportunity to join a solid team of the formerly known as Documentum Business Unit, HQ'd out of Pleasanton, California. And it was literally right down the street from my townhome at that time. So I joined in over there. It was a 5-year tenure, and it was my first foray into P&L management. And before I even got the job, I had to go and look up what does P&L stand for, and all the aspects of what goes into P&L management. Then I got to do it all in real time, all the way up from their customer education department to their professional services team, and at the tail end of my tenure there, America Sales P&L management.
And what surprised you most when, so you say basically didn't know what FP&As was, didn't know what P&L management was. When you're actually in the nitty gritty, did you have sort of a biggest surprising of something that you didn't think was going to be there?
I would say probably the biggest surprise for me was the decisions that you make behind the scenes with regards to OPEX management. They have real and lasting impact on the outcomes of the business, and people's lives are impacted by that. While I was at EMC, we're going through this process. We had to, kind of traverse the financial fallout of 2008.
Mm.
And at that point in time, we had to take a 5% pay cut across the board for all EMC employees in order to save people's jobs. And as I was managing the America Sales P&L, it was my job to make sure that those numbers were accurate. And if they were not, I mean, I knew for a fact that it might lead to somebody losing their job, and I didn't want that to happen. It was, yeah.
What's the hardest part about that? Because that can be all consuming, dark. You can have troubles with internal relationships. For you, what was the hardest part of going through something like that?
Yeah, it was just making sure that I did it right. I'm a big advocate of integrity. It's one of my personal, moral values, and making sure that I'm treating others the way that I wish to be treated, that I'm doing the job to the best of my ability. And, nobody likes to go through periods like that. It's just the general ebb and flow of managing a business. But as long as you do it right and treat people the right way, I think people are understanding. And it also leads to force multiplication of the go to market machine. If you retain top talent, if you do things the right way, you're going to make sure that the business is taken care of, and subsequently the folks as well.
Hmm. So you took pride in doing it the right way. You knew that that would pan out, and then on the other side of it, you got to stick around long enough to see that, hey, this cost reduction has a real benefit to what we're trying to do in the business. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. Definitely.
Okay. And then your next stop is at NetApp. And I'm really interested in this experience too, because it looks like you managed kind of the deal desk function for part of NetApp by the end. And I did that when I worked at Google Cloud for a while. And I just got to see so many interesting deals. Like it was awesome. You get to work with top sellers. The commercial model is changing and innovating under your feet. So I'm curious, kind of what drove you to the NetApp opportunity, and then I'll want to get into what you learned through the actual deals.
Yeah, the first driving factor was culture. NetApp at that time was high flying, well renowned for having a great culture, quarterbacked by folks like Tom Mendoza of the Mendoza School of Business at Notre Dame, and Dan Warmenhoven. These are folks that have long standing careers of doing things and winning the right way. And I just did a search. What are the top companies of company cultures in the San Francisco Bay Area where I live? And they were right at the top. So I just kind of started prospecting. Next thing you know, I talked to a recruiter, got an opportunity to go down there, and I found out that they'd certainly lived up to the culture. It was a very fun experience to join that team.
What did culture mean for you at that point in your life when you're searching? Hey, I want to work for a place that has great culture. Is that they have a 4.5 star out of 5 somewhere on a database? Like when you're deconstructing it, what did that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, the great places to work ratings were, at that point in time, kind of the barometer of where a company ranked in that cultural process. But, it's really going down there. Do they value their employees? How do they show that value with their employees? Are they looking to retain top talent, or is the turnover ratio sky high? NetApp checked all the boxes. And I'm happy to say that I went down there, and it was a great 3 years of my career.
One of the things that I really like about your career is that you've kind of been on every spectrum of operations of the go-to-market model, like from the modeling side of it to in the nitty-gritty on deals. And this part of it seems that you were more on deals. I'm curious what it was like for you, kind of riding sidecar with sales as a deal desk manager.
That's the beauty of revenue operations, sales operations at the time when I was at NetApp. But for instance, we had one large consumer electronic business that called us up. They said, hey, we're standing up kind of like the first foray into AI, and we need $30 million worth of storage gear in 2 weeks. Do you want our business? And that's a great opportunity, not only for the account executive that's managing the account, but to your point, riding sidecar on that type of a deal negotiation. You don't just pull out the master purchasing agreement of this customer and say, okay, here's your discount thresholds by product line. This is what we can give you to meet that need. They're saying, look, I'm going to drop $30 million in your bank account. You're going to have to beat your master purchasing agreement discounting. And that's where RevOps comes in. That's where the real rubber meets the road on deal negotiation. And that's where I feel like I had a positive impact riding sidecar with an awesome account executive that did execute that contract.
So you're becoming pretty well versed in the world of sales at this point. You've done sort of on the strategy side before, and now like really in the mix, and you choose to stick with it. We'll get to the rest of your career here soon, but is there a point where you're like, a lot of people find that relationship can be so challenging sometimes, I think, because sales pull so hard, but you kind of kept going for it. And I'm just curious, what about it intrigued you? What did you like about it?
I think you really have to prove that you're a trusted advisor, that you're an advocate of field go-to-market resources. So they don't think that you're just deal prevention. You have to make sure that you are deal enablement, go-to-market field resource enablement. And that could be anything from comp plans to territory design to deal negotiation to go-to-market tech stack management, et cetera. I think it's absolutely critical to foster the development of those relationships so people know, hey, you're not the person behind the scenes that's trying to shoot that deal before it even became a deal, right? And I'm happy to say that, there's an ebb and flow working with some folks who automatically just go to the deal prevention side of the house. But when you prove yourself and say, here, I'm an advocate for this deal. I'm an advocate for you. And I'm going to do everything that I possibly can in my power to get it done and get it done the right way. That's where the trust is developed and the relationships just get stronger and stronger.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. That was my experience too. I came from sales, and so I just loved trying to win the deals. It was important to me, and I think sellers really appreciate that because it's their life.
100%. Sales is hard, as you know full well. It is certainly more of an art than it ever is a science. I think a lot of people, maybe there's an underappreciation for that. It's certainly not lost on me. I've carried a bag early in my career doing some kind of inside sales rep type jobs. And funnily enough, my first job, or humorously enough, my first job was at Macy's Men's Suits, which some
Really?
folks are like, well, that's not selling tech, but it is certainly sales.
Oh, that's certainly sales. Can you tell us that story, please? Because that sounds good. So you're what, a college student or just out of college and selling suits across the floor at Macy's?
Pretty much. After my senior year of high school, it was really my first job. And it's one of those things, can you sell the Armani suits, or are you just, selling kind of the baseline brand? Do you understand, things from double vent, single vent, miter sleeves, etc., your notched lapel versus others, double single breast? There's just so many different facets of what it is that you would prove in your value proposition to say, hey, this is a great looking suit on you. What occasion are you dressing for? And once you feel out your customer to that certain extent, you'll understand how it is to make a recommendation. And you could take those themes across anything that you're selling, whether it's suits, whether it's tech, whether it's anything else. And I think they're highly applicable across the board.
100%. 100%. Did you like doing that? That's facing a lot of people on a regular basis. People in retail can be emotional. It's a big purchase they might not know that much about. Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, I did. In certain aspects, you have no idea that the person that you're helping is actually like a key C-suite executive in the Silicon Valley or
Yeah.
in San Francisco. You have no idea. You're just doing your best possible job to make sure that you're completing the sale, but also making them happy, right? You really have to If they're not happy with it, it's coming back anyways. That's just kind of like a foray into customer satisfaction, retention, etc. But these folks, by and large, were good people. I met a lot of great folks and built some solid relationships. So I did enjoy it for what it's worth.
You've said this a couple of times to just kind of just do the best possible job, right? And just knock out what it is that's in front of you, and the rest will follow. Where does that come from? Is that something from childhood?
I mean, everybody's kind of like a buzz phrase today, right? Everybody can say, well, I'm a perfectionist. I work hard. That's a fact. It's funny because I'll go through a lot of jobs when you go through, whether or not it be the interview process or meeting a new executive that you're supporting in your current role. You have to say, I've got a proven work ethic. I am a perfectionist. I want to do it the right way. I want to do a good job. Best example of that. This is well before I had kids and I was married. But I used to work two jobs. In addition to my corporate job at EMC, I used to wait tables at night. And in addition to that, maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment. I decided to start grad school at Santa Clara University. So I'm working like 16-hour days, and then I'm doing the evening and weekends program down there. But it's a proof point for work ethic. You don't get into a university like Santa Clara if you're not going about your business and doing it the right way. So all the above, for what it's worth, are examples of,
Did you always have that as a kid? You were always kind of steadfast and on the ball. Was it baseball? Were your parents the ones that instilled that in you? Where does it come from?
I think so. But you really have to have the drive to do it. I mean, nobody's going to force your hand, right? Playing baseball and going to school at the same point in time is the equivalent of working two jobs. I was also in the marching band in high school as well. So you add all that up and it's a pretty full plate. But I don't know if it's just the way that I'm wired. I'm sure my wife would probably say that's the case. But, at the end of the day, my father always used to tell me, you get out of it what you put into it. And I know from that fact, I'm just going to give it everything I've got. And as they will tell you, playing baseball, you leave it all out of the field.
This is one of the reasons why I love doing this show, is because I always get to hear that people like you seem to have this story from when they're getting started of working a couple jobs or something where it's just very clear that there's an extra level of drive that was going to bring you forward. So I certainly appreciate you sharing that. So getting back to the career, you're at NetApp. NetApp is a cultural phenomenon and a rocket ship at that time. But you find another rocket ship, perhaps one of the only ones at that time in the software world that is even moving faster, and that's Workday. So can you talk about what was most intriguing about joining Workday at that time?
Yeah, so it's not like I was actively prospecting for any opportunity. I was very happy at NetApp. I had built out a much more operationally efficient field enabling process for our West Enterprise area deal desk that facilitated some of those multi-million-dollar contracts. The business was humming, and it was great to see. But I got a call from the same recruiter that recruited me to NetApp. She had joined Workday. And if I'm being honest, the commute from the East Bay down to Silicon Valley was beating me up after 3 years.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
every day I would drive past Workday's HQ on my way down to NetApp. I'm very familiar with Workday's founders. They're the same founders of PeopleSoft where I started my career. So when you take a look at kind of the good culture where I thought I was going to build a career before the Oracle acquisition, all of a sudden you have effectively the second coming of PeopleSoft, known as Workday, only now leveraging a cloud SaaS type of technological architecture, which is the new modern age. So I'm thinking to myself as I'm driving past Workday's HQ every day, what are they going to need a guy like me? When are they going to get to a point where they need somebody to come in and have a more operationally efficient way of equitable distribution of territories? Or how do they need to structure sales compensation to up-level revenue generation? Like I said, I got that call from the recruiter. I told her, hey, I'm not really looking for a job right now. I'm pretty happy where I'm at. She said, hey, just take a look at the JD. And I took a look at the JD. I gave her a call back, and I was like, did you write this for me? Like, did you take a look at my background? Because you know me pretty well at this point in time. But she did not, and it was a great fit of a well-known culture, and I got to get realigned with a lot of my former colleagues from PeopleSoft.
That's awesome. And you're doing what looks to be mostly like sales strategy at that point. So pretty forward-looking stuff, but also a culmination of everything that you've been doing. You've kind of played the analyst role. You've played the on the deal role, and now it's like, okay, take everything about that and also start advising the business on the future. Am I hitting what you're actually doing at that point?
Workday had recently gone through their IPO. Unfortunately, I wasn't there for that from a financial perspective, but regardless of which, I wouldn't trade my time at NetApp for anything, to be honest with you. But they were functioning at Workday very much so like a late stage startup. And their growth had become so exponential that we needed to figure out a more operationally efficient process to support that growth quickly, or we were going to be behind the eight ball very, very fast. So yeah, I came up there from a sales strategy perspective. How do we manage all of the tens of thousands of known customer and prospect accounts? How do we account score those accounts to put together the right territories that gets the right equitable distribution of sales opportunity to the right number of AEs with the right, basically your control, your span of control with management on those number of AEs to drive the business? I'm happy to say that we made things drastically more operationally efficient in a very short period of time. We aligned all the comp plans to pay people for, a top performance type business. And obviously they're still doing very, very well for themselves.
Yeah. Now I run a territory design business, so I have to ask the next follow-up question very selfishly. What was the hardest part of designing territories for such a large company at that stage of the game?
Yeah, it's tough because when you're a smaller business and you have a significant number of prospect and customer accounts, you have ample opportunity. So for instance, you could have a large enterprise AE that owns 85 accounts. But over time, that number gets whittled down. You get a little bit more market saturation. You obviously get a higher number of customers. You grow the number of AEs, so your patches shrink. In that scenario, you got to make sure that the patches that you're giving to your teams are actually like they mean something. For instance, I can't give a large enterprise account executive 50 accounts, all of whom bought Oracle or SAP in the past 6 months. There's no budget, there's no opportunity. And I just put their backs against the wall. That's not something that I would ever take pride in. So I wanted to make sure that we did it right.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense. And your next move is when I do know that you're a glutton for punishment, as you said, because you then move to a VC-backed startup. From what I can tell, your sales operations hire number one, and the plan was to kind of build starting with you. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
So how did you start? What was the plan?
So I walked in the door at Marqeta. A lot of my colleagues in my network were saying, "Oh, you're working for Marketo." No, not marketing automation, fintech. At that point in time, I couldn't have told you what fintech was. And then when you start peeling back the layers about what is card issuance and program management, couldn't tell you. But I knew FP&A, sales operations, and revenue operations very, very well. So when I go in there, the foundation was just not level set for building a generational business, which is what Marqeta did become. But at that point in time, it was really, let's do the little things right so we can do the big things right. One of my first weeks, I think it was the second week that I was at Marqeta, I sat through an hour and a half long meeting, and we got 75% of the way through entering one sales opportunity in our instance of Salesforce.com. And I didn't want to be, that guy in the room, but I did need to raise my hand just before the end of the call and say, hey, you can't expect your field account executives to spend an hour and a half to enter 75% of one opportunity in Salesforce. They won't do it. And if they won't do it, then it makes me largely ineffective because I can't extract any statistical relevance to any KPIs. And we were able to figure it out. We netted down just a handful of required fields that would help us get the KPIs that we needed. But that's just an example of the little things. We then started to shore up our go-to-market tech stack. I built out a revenue enablement team as part of my revenue operations organization. We went fully global, EMEA and APJ. And the go-to-market machine really started humming. And I'm happy to say that led to a very successful IPO in June of 2021. So my first exit of my career, but it was great to be a part of.
Oh, that's amazing. And I wanted to talk about your team build out, because from what I could tell, was your first kind of leadership position was at Workday, or was it before Workday?
I was at Workday.
It was at Workday. So could you take me through your kind of personal leadership evolution from that first job? I think it always surprises some people, what leadership actually entails. From day to day, your calendar gets blown up, and then you're now at a company that can probably move a little bit more quickly, building out teams, moving globally, preparing for IPO. Take me through the evolution there.
Yeah, so I've managed teams from 2, 3 direct reports all the way up to ballpark 30. It's really managing your span of control to make sure that you can get around to making folks know that they're valued. But we also have to understand many things, as I'm sure you and all the revenue operations leaders or go-to-market leaders that you've interviewed understand. In revenue operations, we're not going to pair 1-to-1 ratio for RevOps resources to the field resources that we support.
Right.
That's where it very much so becomes a do more with less type of an approach, which is where the operational efficiency kicks in. So we always have to have our eyes on that prize as a revenue operations team. One, we got to make sure folks feel valued, that we keep morale high, and that they're motivated to do the job that we are asking them to do. But two, that we do it in the most efficient way possible. A great example of this, everybody uses Excel. I used to be a bit of a spreadsheet jockey at the start of my career when I was in FP&A. I could put together the most killer financial model on the face of the planet. I can roll it up to my SVP of America Sales, and he could absolutely love it and want me to reproduce that on a weekly basis. The problem is that if it took me 2 to 3 days to create each rendition of that financial model and update it, Houston, we have a problem, because I just sapped 50% of my weekly bandwidth on one financial model. You have to keep that same focus when you build out a revenue operations organization. Do we have a process in place that's repeatable within a timely fashion? And do we have time? Like, for instance, do you have 20% buffer to get around to the ad hoc requests that you know are going to come in? It really is a yin and a yang type of an approach to managing your resources, setting them up for success by managing their bandwidth, and keeping them happy at all times.
It's interesting because it makes me think of, like, from the vendor side, if you're thinking about purchasing software, that's the ROI that they're going to give you is, hey, this would take one of your team members 2 days to do. And so, right, this software is clearly worth it. So you can end up with a tech stack that's quite large. You can look at certain processes or tasks and say, well, good enough is okay in certain areas, and we just have to leave things the way that they are. Can you talk to me about that dance between making sure your resources aren't spending all their time on one thing, evaluating new technology and new ways to do things, and keeping some things at bay?
Yeah, I mean, a fully functional tech stack is a very clear component of that foundation. Here's an example for you with regards to my most recent employer. We had over 23,000 existing customers that we needed to manage with 35 customer success managers. You're not going to get around to making your customer feel like they're getting that personal level of attention unless you have a sales engagement tool as the front end to have periodic checkpoints with your customer. If you do that properly, then you can save the bandwidth for going out and buying a customer a cup of coffee, taking them out to dinner, making them sure that they feel valued. And that will subsequently obviously keep your customer retention rates high. But, once again, you have to have that operational efficiency in the tech stack to extend bandwidth. You can take that across the board with whether or not you're managing a deal desk, your enablement teams, whatever. If you have operational efficiency, you're going to be able to do a lot more with less. Harken back to my
Absolutely.
previous statement.
How do you manage to continually look at new technologies, to keep your pulse on what's going on? Obviously, the world of AI is exploding right now, but you've got a lot to do on the day to day. You have technology that you used in the past. How do you make time to see what's coming for the future?
I've always managed to carve out just at least a minor chunk of my time to make sure that I'm evaluating new tools that are on the market. Obviously, like in my previous role, I had my director of go-to-market systems and tools that would make sure that we're evaluating tools. But at any given point in time, my cell phone is generally ringing and I'm getting SDRs calling me and talking about a new tool. It's very easy to just brush those folks off. As we've already covered, I'm a big advocate of treating others the way that you wish to be treated. So I try not, but I won't be that guy. Let's put it that way. So I'll generally take those calls, set up a 15-minute pitch just to make sure that I'm in the know with any competing technologies within each layer of our tech stack. And that way, when it comes down to, do we need to evaluate a new tool? We've got a good pulse on what's available on the market that might be the best fit for our organization. You get the right tools in place, and if you optimize those, then your field effectiveness just skyrockets.
I love that. I tend to do the same thing, especially because I'm selling in my business all day, and so who am I to not, if there's a prospecting email that makes sense or a call that makes sense, check it out, see what they have going on.
These are good folks. They're looking obviously for the next sales lead, and when you're VP of RevOps and you're managing that tech stack, an SDR does their homework to find you, call you on your cell phone. Kudos to them. Well done.
I think so too. All right. So I think I have one more question, I guess, is so you've done a lot. You've been kind of the analyst role. You've been with the field directly tied to them. You've done sales strategy broadly, big companies, fast moving startups, private equity backed, building teams. You've kind of done all of it. So if somebody were to listen to this and they were to say, wow, Scott's career is pretty cool, I think I would like to emulate him. I can't play baseball, so I'm going to try to emulate this part of his career. What advice would you give him?
I'd say, give it a shot. I had a conversation when I was at revenue enablement with one of our SDRs, or when I was at Marquetta with one of our SDRs, and I talked to her about revenue enablement. And she was like, what's revenue enablement? And I was like, it's the internal educational arm of our business, and I think you'd be phenomenal at it. That's what she's now doing. All that being said, for somebody that's coming through the ranks, let's say they're hanging up their spikes on their baseball career, they're looking for the next opportunity. The reason why I love revenue operations is not because I'm a glutton for punishment. It's because I enjoy, to your point, riding sidecar. I enjoy the pursuit of revenue generation and operational efficiency to do more with less. And you're always going to find that those opportunities are abundant wherever you go. So for folks pursuing that next role, take a look at it. If you like to do things, if you're a perfectionist, much like myself, if you've got, if you're resourceful, you like to figure stuff out, revenue operations it's a great opportunity. Doesn't mean you can't become an account executive at some point in time of your career. There's always that transitional opportunity, but at least, you're affiliated with that type of growth and pursuits of the business. It's always been very attractive to me in my career.
Well, Scott, I really appreciate that. That's a great note to end on and a positive note to end on. Thanks so much for the time. We'll post your LinkedIn so folks know how to say hi if they get the chance after listening to this. But again, we just really appreciate you coming in and telling your story.
Well, Kevin, thanks so much for having me. I really do appreciate your time.